I am Onolina from ThinkArts, and it is my great pleasure to welcome our new viewers and our returning viewers from yesterday to the online iteration of Junior Kolkata Literary Meet 2022. This is our sixth edition of curating this festival in association with the Tata Steel Kolkata Literary Meet. And while we would have loved to have these sessions online, we are glad to be able to see you in this way as well. We are delighted to have with us today Madhurima, and we are doubly delighted that she'll be in conversation with Isha, who has been a great friend and family to ThinkArts for all these years. Madhurima Vidyarthi is an endocrinologist who always wanted to be a writer. My Grandmother's Masterpiece is her first book, but she is planning to write many more. When she is not writing books or prescriptions, Madhurima likes to travel, eat good food, and delve into history. Isha Daga is an entrepreneur and arts leader who is passionate about children's writing and theatre. She has been a freelance journalist before embarking on her entrepreneurial journey in design, marketing, and engineering. She has led countless sessions and workshops on writing, storytelling, and the arts for young audiences, and participated in arts projects in India and abroad. Isha serves in an honorary capacity on the executive committees of several arts, sociocultural, and educational organizations in the city. Before passing on the mic to Isha, I'd like to remind everyone that though we can't see you, we would love to hear from you. So do send any comments or questions that you may have over Facebook and YouTube, wherever you're watching from. And with that, over to you, Isha, and I'm looking forward to a wonderful session. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Onolina, and welcome to this session at the Junior Kolkata Lit Meet, curated by ThinkArts. It's wonderful to have you here, Madhurima, especially so because Madhurima happens to be a very dear school friend, and it's not every day that people get an opportunity to, be in conversation with an author who has such a brilliant debut novel for children. So welcome here.
Thank you. It's brilliant to be here. I mean, I've been audience, obviously, over the years, and I love the work that ThinkArts does and whatever Kolkata Literary Meet does as well. And it's very exciting and a bit surreal, really, to be on the other side. So thank you. And it's great to have Isha in conversation with me because we've had many conversations over the years, but this is special also because of that.
So thank you, Madhurima. And I would love for our audience to get a glimpse into my grandmother's masterpiece before we, delve into questions about your writing and about the book. So if you'd like to give us a brief, blurb.
Yeah, I'll give you a blurb. I'll show you the book. A lot of people may not have seen the book or be familiar with it. So it's called My Grandmother's Masterpiece, and that is the grandmother in the story. The story is told by the grandchild, whose name is Minnie, and the grandmother's name is Minima, which obviously for those of you who are familiar with this Kolkata Bengali culture, you know that we use a lot of, pet names, nicknames, and, loving names, which can sometimes be very ridiculous outside of the family. So it's the story is about a grandmother who is a very typical grandmother and who likes to stay at home and do things with her grandchild, and suddenly she rediscovers, and I say read because she's had this passion for art when she was a child, but then obviously other things took priority, and she rediscovers her passion for art, for drawing, for painting, and how the rest of the family reacts to that. And it's all seen through the eyes of this 7-year-old grandchild. So what I might do is just read you the first paragraph because it will give you an idea of how the book starts. So it says, "This is the story of how my grandmother became a famous artist. It happened somewhere between my 7th and 8th birthdays. So she was really old and also a grandmother. And I didn't know she was an artist. And of course, she was not famous. And then she was both, all at once. I didn't know old people could be." The story starts.
Thank you very much for sharing that. And you have written since childhood, haven't you?
That's
and
right.
You often refer to this as your guilty secret. So why is that, Madhurima? I'm very curious.
It's it's not guilty, but it's these are things that you do for yourself, and then you feel that perhaps it is something that should not be prioritized, because then you have career and you have a home and you have other things that always take priority. But I think once when we were training in London, obviously there wasn't too much of a writing, and that was quite a long break. Although there are plenty of notebooks from that period, because I couldn't help it. I couldn't stop writing, or at least jotting down things or planning books. But now that we are here and things are settled, I'm so pleased to have been able to get back to writing. And obviously, this is the icing on the cake. So even when I started to write again properly, I wasn't thinking of publishing. It happened very sort of organically and quite serendipitously, as it were.
Well, we're very glad that it did, actually. So how are you currently balancing your doctor's prescriptions and daily drafts?
With great difficulty. But I know that I feel miserable when I can't write. So I try and find some time for it, even if it is not some very serious bit of writing, even if it's only a paragraph, even if I'm just sitting there with my manuscript and a pen, because I write by hand. I'm desperately old-fashioned. So I write by hand. You can see my desk behind me. This is the space in which I work, and nobody's allowed in here.
Well, I'll just have to sneak my way in one day. Yeah. And were there any particular books or authors, Madhurima, that inspired you to start writing children's books particularly?
No. I think because of the way we read when we were growing up, there weren't so many distractions, so many devices. We just read and read and read. And, a lot of us read in more than one language. So you grow up with a very rich sort of cultural and literary heritage, whether it is English or Bangla or Hindi or whatever it is you're reading. And then when you write, obviously, as a child, you write, I guess, what is appropriate for that age. But even, I've been looking through my published writing from about 20 years ago, and a lot of it makes me cringe. But
are you talking about The Homecoming?
The Homecoming
was not published, right?
No, The Homecoming is it's actually been optioned for an Indo-Italian collection of short stories. Yeah. So what we're doing is, and that was written after we came back. In a way, it sort of opened the floodgates after we came back from London. A lot of that feeling is in there. It's quite emotional. But the Homecoming, I'm very excited about it. It's being translated from English into Italian.
Oh my goodness, that's wonderful.
The anthology is 6 Indian writers and 6 Italian writers, and the works will be translated across languages. So I'm very pleased about that, because that is, it's like the beginning of the second phase. It's more a second coming than a homecoming. Thank you for bringing that up. It's very close to my heart.
Absolutely, I'm sure it is, and we look forward to reading it. When is it going to be published?
I think it's in translation at the moment. So I think because of the pandemic, deadlines have gone for a toss. So I'll let you know as soon as I know.
And it's an Italian collaboration.
Yes, it's an Italian collaboration. So we'll see.
So your first novel, this novel, My Grandmother's Masterpiece, somehow, there's a lot about suppressed dreams in it, isn't it?
That's right.
And that also relates to maybe your passion for writing. Does it? It could.
Yes and no. Yes and no, in the sense that obviously, like the previous generations, we didn't have to give up we were not forced to give up our dreams. We prioritized them. So, when the time came and we said to get career and training, and it's always linked to earning, isn't it? The validation of anything, doing the research and balancing it. So that was going on. And this is, like I said, it's the icing on the cake, because obviously it's great to have what you've written in everybody's hands in bookstores. And it's quite embarrassing, actually, because then it's out there for, open to public comment.
It's funny that you should be embarrassed considering, you were always on stage for all the prize distributions, being a regular topper at school. So you really should be used to
that is why you shouldn't have a child friend as a moderator.
Well, there are many secrets. It's not just your writing that's coming out. What are some of the most surprising things that you have learned about yourself in creating your books? In creating your stories, I won't say books because, this is one of the first few, but I know you've been writing and, your website has beautiful little stories about baby Ruth and so much more. So what are some of the interesting things you've learned about yourself while writing?
That's a very interesting question, isn't it? It's something that is forcing me to think. I think it's the fact that I have realized I enjoy the process of the creation and the sort of putting together of the characters and the plot and the research. I love the research, especially when the research that I have done for my historical fiction. I love it. I mean, I took 6 months at the National Library. I just juggled my clinics and things like that and spent hours there to get things right, to come out and see patients. But I suppose I should be grateful that I can do both. So it's the fact that you have to think, and you have to sometimes put yourself in your character's positions and think about how not you, but maybe a 7-year-old or a 70-year-old would react in a situation. And I say this when I'm talking about my book. It was the first line that suddenly came into my head. I was reading something else, and the first line sort of said, this is the story of etc. And I thought, how do I take this forward? So it wasn't as easy as the first line. It wasn't as easy as the title, because I mean the title, it's what is on the cover came into my head very quickly. But it wasn't as easy then writing the rest of the book. And obviously it went through a few edits. I had to leave out my favorite part, because the story started with the young granddaughter slapping a boy in her class because he'd either pushed her or trampled on her pens or something.
How could you possibly leave that out? I would never let anybody edit that.
Yes, so I'm going to put that in another book, because it's my favorite part, and I really wanted to start the story with that. But you do sort of realize that it's taking away from the main story and the main character, and it puts a different spin onto the writing or onto the plot. So so that's the bit that I realized that maybe I was. It made me also the whole process of editing and going through the various drafts also made me look at writing in a different kind of way. I had a brilliant editor. Shayani Basu of Dougville is an absolutely brilliant editor. And she gave me so much leeway. But I did understand what she was trying to say about plot and characterization, length of the novel, and things like that. So I think now when I write, I do keep all of that in mind, not necessarily looking for the next publisher, but to make it a more complete book.
So a lot of learning.
Very much, very much. It's been a very steep, very quick learning curve.
I'm sure. And were there any challenges you faced while, I know you said that it happened quite organically. Were there any challenges you faced in the past when have you ever tried to publish in the past?
Oh, yes. I mean,
it was the Homecoming itself, or was
not
it?
The Homecoming, many years ago. When
Fantasy. That was fantasy.
That's the historical fantasy. That's right. And I mean, obviously, I look at it now and I see, what needs to go and what needs to be improved. But I had no help, nobody to ask for advice. And I did what editing I could. I sent it out to a couple of, and we didn't have a very transparent process. There was no self-publishing for one. There weren't too many, agents that one could approach. You were limited to what I was doing for the Statesman or for other things, and the magazines were on their way out, I think, at that age. And even so, they had their sort of established writers. So it's hard for a new writer, but it's hard for I think, a newbie in any profession. So I don't really regret it. I don't mind that, I had to wait because I was doing other things.
Of course. Absolutely. You've spoken about, how an ordinary grandmother like all of us have seen and know and love.
That's right.
Become a creator of a masterpiece.
That's right.
And as a grandmother, as a well-developed grandmother. So how did this thought develop?
It had to be somebody very ordinary, very relatable. I think there are too many books written about extraordinary people, too many stories about extraordinary people, perfect children, which is why the child is quite British. But the grandmother had to be fairly, the grandmother had to be like my grandmother, maybe your grandmother, maybe, 9 out of 10 who read the book, their grandmothers. And I have got this sort of feedback, it's, there are children who've read the book with their grandmother and they've actually written in to say that, I read it with my grandmother and she said, yes, these are the things that used to happen. So that's very reassuring, very satisfying, because it means you've got to connect with the reader.
Oh, for sure. When I read it, there were so many things that made me smile because you could just feel that in your very nuanced writing, actually. So would you like to share an excerpt about Minima with us?
Yeah, I could do that. Yeah, so there is, she is very grandmotherly, but she is also, she's also quite unusual. And just before I read this excerpt, I'd like to share a question that I had to come across in a previous session from a child. And it was right after I had given them the summary. And this boy put up his hand and asked, does this story take place in London? And I thought, that one flash, I thought, is he asking the question because, grandmothers can't achieve anything in this country? Or is it this sort of widespread concept that in London or America or wherever, you can do anything you like at any age you like? And so I said to him that, no, it's very much based in Calcutta and miracles do happen here. Look around you. So I'll just read 2 very short bits which tell you that she's a very typical grandmother, but she's also fairly unusual. So her name is Minima. That is what the grandchild calls her. And it says, Minima was my father's mother. Her hobbies were sleeping and pretending to watch TV and making me eat. She also liked to snore and quarrel with my grandfather. She loved to sleep on the cold stone floor of her room, especially in the summer. And she loved to snore. How she snored. Now, that's fairly typical for a lot of grandmothers or a lot of elderly people. So then, a few pages later, the mother has bought paints for the child and the grandmother on request. And the grandmother hasn't really engaged with the paint box. And the mother says to her, have patience, Nini. Your grandmother has such a lot of work to do. What work, I wondered. She didn't really do all the things that my friends said their grandmothers did. She didn't cook, she didn't do pujo, and she didn't make a fuss about cleaning. None of the usual grandmotherly things, except she did tell me stories. So there is this, little indication in the beginning that she's not just
a grandmother.
That's right.
She's quite a piece in her own life. And that's wonderful, to read because these are very traditional roles, aren't they? And so our society does kind of almost impose these stereotypes, and we perpetuate them in many ways. So you have subverted this stereotype of the grandmother very, very, beautifully in your novel, and also about the relationship between the daughter-in-law and the mother-in-law, one of those very, very, traditionally we always, that relationship is always shown in such a negative light. But here you show the daughter-in-law always encouraging and standing by her mother-in-law and wanting her to really fulfill her dreams. So would you like to share another excerpt? I'm sorry, I keep asking you to read excerpts.
No, it's a pleasure.
It's such a delightful book. And I know our readers and our viewers will love to get a glimpse into the book.
So this is a bit where, finally her grandmother has been, encouraged to take up painting because the paints have come and she's painting at home. But then the mother, so the daughter-in-law, comes back and the daughter-in-law comes home from work and she says, there is this art school where elderly people go and retired people, grandparents, and there's a lot of discussion. And obviously the men in the family, so actually her son and her husband are trying to give options that would keep her at home. Because she has this, she's been taken for granted that she would do the babysitting while the daughter-in-law goes out to work and she would do everything else and, be there for everyone, for the staff that comes in and things like that. So she says, don't waste your breath on this. And so the grandfather then says, where will she get the time? At this age, you want her to whiz around, going here and there. What will she do going to art class? What is the point? All rubbish, waste of time. And he stomps off. And the grandmother is annoyed, obviously, but she doesn't express her annoyance. And then the son, so the child's father, comes in and says, would it help if we ask someone to come home and teach them? And that way Ma wouldn't have to go anywhere. So the assumption is that Ma never goes anywhere and she shouldn't have to. And Nini would still be with her. So her role as the default child sitter, the child minder, must be fulfilled, whatever else she may choose to do. So Ma was getting angry. We are not talking about art classes for Nini. We are talking about art classes for Ma, not babysitting for Nini. Don't miss the point. Ma, what do you think? And then Minima says, Nana, never mind, said Minima, getting up. No need for so much trouble. And anyway, there are no more colors left. So this is when she's used up the paint box. And then the father tells her, see, it's not such a big deal for her as you think. And there is this very typical sort of assumption that because she's not expressed it, she doesn't feel it. But then the mother persists and she says, Ma, wait. Ma didn't move. She stood watching Ninima. If it could be arranged, the class and the car and Nini and the house and everything, would you go? Minima stopped in the doorway. She was looking at us and we were all looking at her. She was fidgeting like Baba and me. She kept looking from the clock to the kitchen, to us again, and then towards the storm outside. I was sure she was going to shake her head and say no again. But then, yes, she said, and went into the kitchen.
I got goosebumps, I just had goosebumps when I read this passage, because it really is true, isn't it, that you need so much courage sometimes because the roles are so clearly defined, cast in stone almost, that it really takes somebody like you have to have a daughter-in-law like that or a mother-in-law like that.
And that's sad. It's sad because then, it's still a woman helping a woman. There isn't, although there are two other people at home, the father and the husband. Nobody says, you go if you want, we'll manage.
Yes.
And the daughter-in-law in that little, in that tiny conversation, she's made so many arrangements. She's managed the car, the house, the child, and everything else, and her work, obviously.
Her work, yes, of course. So it's a lot of, it's just the apathy from others that really prevents women sometimes. And it is an issue close to my heart. So while it may not have been the purpose of your book, it is important, I think, for, it's especially wonderful when it comes through in children's writing, because they are our future, and they are what, they
Certainly.
are how our society is going to turn out. So thank you very much for bringing that out. It's really lovely to see that. And it also, the way the character of the father develops, towards the end of the book, there is an acceptance,
Sure.
Reluctant acceptance, but there is
That's right.
And it's so much about creating awareness. So I we look forward to that in other books as well.
Thank you.
Bringing us to the topic of other books, you are a history addict, self-confessed history addict. So apart from what you're currently doing, do you have other plans for historical novels? Or?
I have one completed historical novel which I am currently editing, and it's not for children. It's not for children in the sense that I don't think it would be for the same age group as this book, but I think it would be for young adults, should they wish to read it, should they actually want to engage in it. It's much longer, obviously. It's 130,000 words. So, a proper novel. It's about a very tumultuous 4 years in the late 17th century. It is also centered around Calcutta because, very cheesily, I'll call it city of my heart. There is no other place where home could be. A lot of my writing is in and around Calcutta. And I won't give it away, but that is the book I've been researching for. And because there was so much in that period, so much that went before and after. And that late 17th century was actually a very interesting time in this area because, Bengal had, it was Bengal, Bihar and Orissa, as Bengal was known then. And Calcutta had not really come up. So Hooghly was the nerve center. And even Murshidabad came much later. So it was Hooghly and then Patna and Agra and Delhi. This is towards the end of Aurangzeb's reign, the later years at least. But if you look at what was happening, there were and all these characters, I had such great fun thinking them up. I mean, and in fact, I learned so much because it's not the kind of history we were taught in school.
It's not always that you associate with great fun.
Yeah. So because, there were the so-called native Bengali speakers, it's sort of very nebulous, but then you had this whole Urdu, not Hindi at that time, Hindustani, Persian, Urdu speaking segment, because obviously it was under the Mughal Empire. There were two Nawabiyats. There was one at Patna, one at Bengal, and at Dhaka. And that was actually the capital then. And you had all these foreigners. So you had the Portuguese and the English and the Dutch and the French. And, everybody who was sort of in a very vicious network of spying and trading. And it was brilliant.
Basically.
Sorry?
An international kitchery, basically.
Absolutely, an international kitchery. And that's not something you associate with Hooghly, for example, or Calcutta as it was then. It was just a village and things were happening, but lots of things were happening. So...
But it was a fishing village, so I'm glad it led you there.
Yes. So, yeah.
So would you be able to share a little bit about Nini? Because, coming back to the book, which is what a lot of our viewers are watching to know about, will you tell us a little bit about Nini?
Okay, so she's your, ordinary 7-year-old or 8-year-old child. She's the only child, and she is, spoiled in a way, pleasantly spoiled, because obviously the grandparents spoil her, and she can be brattish. So there are tantrums. There are, I think, 2 quite full-blown tantrums in the book, and I could read you one which sort of...
perhaps the bit where she gets into her drawing.
Yeah. Okay. So the background to this is that her grandmother has gone to this art class and she's given a bag full of these lovely things which Nini is not allowed to use. I mean, she's gone through them, but her mother has threatened her with dire consequences if she should use them. But she wants to go to art class because she thinks, once she goes, she'll get a bag full of goodies. So she's trying to draw a picture. Now, Minima thinks the picture is for school, so she's taken over the picture and she's trying to improve it. But Nini is getting annoyed because it's her picture and she doesn't want anybody touching it. So before I knew what was happening, she had bent over my picture with her brush. No, Minima, no. I tried to stop her. It's my picture. But she only said, 1 minute, 1 minute. I've almost finished. I tried to snatch the picture from her hands, but she was holding it down. So all I did was tear off a corner. Her brush was moving furiously, and I was scared the paper would tear. So I just sat there getting angrier and angrier. It was my picture. Why did she have to paint over my picture? There, she said finally. Finished. And I'll just skip to the bit where she's getting angry. And then she says, I don't want it. This is the child saying, I don't want it. I screamed and flung the picture away from me as hard as I could. I don't want it. Horrible, horrible picture. And I burst out crying. And Tanvi Bhatt has done a beautiful job of actually, this is, sorry, this is not the best
can
way.
you just hold it up a little higher? Yeah.
Yeah. And she's done, if you can see, there's this little great mouth open and fat tears coming down and things like that. So that's when she has the tantrum, and then obviously the mother comes in and tells her off and sort of goes from there.
Thank you so much. And the illustrations are also beautiful.
That's right.
And, we can, if you've been a mother or, like I have, we can completely identify with that open bawling mouth, for a variety of reasons, of course.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So
now we will have to leave the rest actually to our audience to find out with a copy of the book. But we have some questions from our viewers, and some of them are very interesting questions. So we will just launch into them if
sure. Of course.
The first one is, have you always wanted to write for children?
See, I have always wanted to write. And what I believe is that, like good films and bad films, there are books that can be read at any age. And this just came to me as a book through a child's eyes. And I have had some adult readers actually say, why is this a children's book? It should be a book for adults. But that defeats the purpose of the book. I was trying very hard not to make any judgments or any comments about anything. It was just a way to present the story and put in little bits that would perhaps allow people, children and adults to think. But yes, there are certain books that I will write or I have written deliberately for a younger age group or an older age group, like I said. But I would love it if the readers sort of cross over this.
Yeah, so this leads us into our next question, which is, lined with taking off from what you said. How is writing for children different from writing for an adult? Well, I know you said that you'd like your readers to just be a little more.
Okay, so I think when you write deliberately for children, it depends, I think, on the subject, and I think it depends on what you are trying to say about a subject. And I hate books that are preachy, and I was very paranoid about trying not to make this book preachy in any way. But you do use perhaps less complicated language, or you try and present similar thoughts in a fairly linear way instead of doing more showing than telling. You do some showing, of course, but sometimes you just have to spell a couple of things out, which doesn't mean that I don't think children are intelligent. I think we underestimate how intelligent children can be. But I think certain things must be said out loud. Certain mores or principles may not actually be left open to interpretation. So if you ask me for an example, I will say the brattish behavior could not have been left without a bit where the mother comes in and stops it or objects. If this was a children, if this was an adult's book, maybe I wouldn't have had that bit.
Sure. Yeah. So there is a bit of, value creation.
Yeah,
and
that's right. Yeah, I think there is more responsibility, perhaps.
Responsibility, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
can see that.
Yeah.
And, but you're right. It doesn't come across as preachy at all, even though Ma is quite strict,
That's right.
Ma
That's
is,
right.
and unfortunately, it rings true with a little bit of me, and I bet a little bit of you.
Oh, a lot of me. A lot
And
of
for
me.
sure with our mothers who
Yeah,
were
certainly.
very, very loving.
Absolutely.
But yes, they wanted us to
Yeah.
be careful and mind our P's and Q's.
That's right. Totally.
And I'm so glad for that, because increasingly it seems parenting has become more about kind of, it's great to be friends, but we do have a responsibility, don't we, as parents?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, and in fact, the good thing is some of our old teachers, obviously we have teachers in common, a lot of our old teachers have actually made this point to me after reading the book that, I am glad that the mother is, well, old-fashioned, for want of a better word, or like us, or like our mothers, as you said. Because, yeah, certainly, totally. And because increasingly mothers are standing up for all the wrong things or all the not so nice aspects of a child's behavior.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
I have a very interesting question from one of our younger readers. What was the grandmother's real name?
Ooh, can I not reveal that? Because then... can I not reveal that? Because then I can use it in another book. And then you can't say, oh, but you've already written about this before.
Okay, then we will move on to Dada.
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Yeah, sure.
So why does Dada get so annoyed with Minima?
Yeah,
Very valid question. Thank you for asking that.
Absolutely. Thank you for asking that. I'm so glad somebody's talked about it. I think you'll find if you look into your own families or in the extended families or friends and things, that a lot of, okay, now I don't want to sound, I don't want to sound as if I have a gender bias, but I think a lot of older men, perhaps, or men in general, are used to their wives, mothers, sisters, or the women in their family in a certain role. And they are taught, unfortunately, they are brought up by their mothers or grandmothers to consider or regard women in a certain way. That is the unfortunate truth. So the grandfather has seen the grandmother be a housewife, which is not the right term nowadays. All his life, he has seen her taking care of the son, of the home, of his needs while he's gone out to work. And he makes a point about, I retired, I worked all my life. But then the grandmother comes in with, I have worked all my life and there is no retirement for me. So we tend not to value work which is done without payment, whether it is in the house or it is outside the house. Certainly not in the house. And it is taken for granted that even if women work outside the home, they will automatically look after whatever is going on at home, including cooking and children and cleaning and things like that. And I think as mothers and wives and daughters, we all have to be very clear in our head about what our roles are and what we are teaching our children, our sons, our daughters. So it's not enough to say to a daughter, and this is very close to my heart, it is not enough for a mother to say to her daughter that you have to do everything. You have to be this perfect superwoman. You don't have to be a superwoman. You have to learn all the basic skills in life, which will help you to lead your life. And that can be cooking and cleaning. It can also be bank work. It can also be how to negotiate a map. It can also be how to have a job in a bank or be a rocket scientist. And you say exactly the same things to your sons.
Absolutely.
That is how people need to look at men's roles and women's roles. And I think we need to come out of this stereotype where the male comes in as the savior of this downtrodden woman, and because it's not usually true. It's usually either women standing up for women or women being nasty to women. That happens much more frequently.
And it's quite unfortunate that it's perpetuated down generations.
That's right. That's right. And nobody wants to step out of it because it's always happened like that. It's always happened. That doesn't mean anything. It just means you have to rethink it.
Absolutely. And you and I will get into a much longer
discussion about this. So Daga, coming back to Daga, he was he couldn't just understand why she would need a passion at this age. At this age. So again, you've lived your life. You're waiting to die. What else do you want?
Which actually brings us to a related question, which is why did it take Minima, which you just answered actually in a different way. Why did it take Minima so long to start painting? Because nobody else was ready for it.
That's right. And you see, unfortunately, if you don't have your own money, you may not want to ask people for money. And that is true at any age, however kind they are, however close to you. Anything takes money, even to buy some paints. We get things so easily. Children nowadays are given things before they open their mouths. So the concept of asking, the concept of thinking that I can't buy something because I have no money of my own is a fairly alien concept. And that is why I think this needs to be thought out a bit about, if you had your money, how would you manage it? And if you had your money, what would you do with it? And Minima has never had any money of her own. I mean, she's never earned any money. She's always been given whatever it pleases her husband to give her, and then later her son. So there is this bit where she's quarreling with the grandfather, and she says, "I am spending my son's money," and she feels she has a greater right. And that is a recurring theme in the book.
Yeah, there are a lot of interpersonal relationships, family relationships that are, touched upon so beautifully. And I think it will make all readers of any age really, just as you want. Even when I read the book, I could relate to so many parts of that book in the relationships, how, maybe you don't personally experience it, but you have experienced it in the larger context of families and friends. So, very important that you brought that up, and so sensitively. We do have a couple more questions, even though we're on the last minute. So if you could just
sure.
this, perhaps this actually last question, which is a personal one. Are you my teacher from St. Xavier's, Neeta Vidyarthi's daughter?
Yes. Oh dear, who is this?
I'm afraid we aren't disclosing names for the question.
Okay, right. But yes. Thank you for asking. She's my mother, and she's always been a grand role model because, she's been a superwoman. I don't do half as much as she does, but I've seen her all my life, and I wish she had done a little less, because then perhaps she would have had time to do the things that she loved. She wrote beautifully, and she writes now, but again, maybe who knows, if she'd had the time that I have, perhaps she would have done greater things. So yes, thank you for asking that question.
And that brings us to the end of our session. I do hope that our viewers are inspired, young and old, and find time for their passions, to pursue their passions. So thank you so much, Madhurima. It's been an absolutely delightful session. And I do hope our viewers will be inspired to pick up a copy of My Grandmother's Masterpiece and much more for yourselves and to give to everybody you know. Annalena.
Thank you so much, Isha and Madhurima. It was wonderful to hear about your sort of process, what led to this story, and also the excerpts were brilliant. And I'm sure the ones who are tuning in can't wait to grab their own copies. So I have shared a link to the session on the chats, and if you're interested, and as I'm sure you are, please do go to the link and you can get your copy from a vendor near you. And with that, I would like to call this session to a conclusion and to remind all of you that we do have a couple of more programs for the Junior Kolkata Literary Meet that are happening. So do tune in, and we would love to see you again. And thank you so much for joining us today, to our audience, and also once again to Dr. Madhurima and Isha. Thank you so much.
Thank you for
and
having me.
See you again next time.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.